A quarter drops into a slot. A tape deck clicks shut. Somewhere down the hall, a dot matrix printer is screaming through a homework assignment. You just heard all three of those. Perfectly. In your head. Right now. They haven't existed in the real world for decades. But your brain kept them archived anyway. Filed under a year you haven't thought about in a long time. That's what we're doing today. We're opening that file. The 1980s get remembered for the music, the movies, the fashion, but the sounds that actually shaped how we lived. The ordinary clicks, clacks, hums, and beeps of everyday life. Those are the ones nobody thought to record. Nobody thought they mattered until they were gone. Here are the sounds from the 1980s that will instantly take you back. The arcade. Before you even opened the door, you could hear it. That low electronic hum. The one that leaked through the walls of every arcade in America. Not any one game. All of them. Dozens of cabinets bleeding together into a single, buzzing, neon-lit frequency that hit you like a wave the second you stepped inside. By 1982, arcades were pulling in roughly $8 billion a year in quarters alone. More money than Americans were spending at the movies. But the sound you remember isn't the games. Not first, anyway. It's the quarter. That heavy metallic clink as the machine swallowed it. A brief pause. The screen resets. Your life bar appears. And for roughly 90 seconds, you are the most focused human being on Earth. Then, dead. Game over. And your hand is already fishing for the next coin before the continue countdown hits 0. The sound no one talks about is what happened after. You'd play for an hour, maybe 2, completely sealed inside that noise. Then you'd push through the door into daylight, and the silence hit you like cold water. The world sounded empty. You didn't realize the arcade had a frequency until it was gone. The rotary phone. There was no quick call on a rotary phone. Every digit was a physical act. Finger in the hole, drag it to the metal stop, release, and then wait as the dial crawled back at its own speed. Tick, 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 tick. 1 number down, 6 to go. A 2 was quick. A 9 was a journey. If your friend's number had 2 8s and a 0, calling them was a decision you had to be emotionally prepared for. And half the time, nobody picked up. No voicemail. No missed call alert. No little red badge. Just ringing. Then silence. Then the flat, buzzing drone of a busy signal telling you to try again later. But the sound that really defined the rotary phone wasn't the dial. It was the slam. When you were angry in the 80s, you didn't tap a red circle on a screen. You hung up, hard. The handset hit the cradle so fast the bell inside rang, the counter shook, and the person on the other end heard it. A punctuation mark made of plastic and rage. You could measure exactly how mad someone was by the sound of them hanging up a rotary phone. Modern phones robbed us of that. You can't slam a touchscreen. You can only poke it silently, like a passive-aggressive ghost. The VCR. Friday night had a sound, and it started at the video store. You picked your movie. You drove it home. You peeled open the plastic case, slid that chunky cassette out, and pushed it into the machine. The mechanical pull, the tape catching, the soft whir as the head spun into position. That was the sound of the night officially beginning. By 1987, over 50 million American homes had a VCR, and nearly all of them shared the same universal frustration. The last person didn't rewind. So you sat there, watching the counter roll backward, listening to that high-pitched fast wind whine while the family argued over snacks in the other room. Sometimes it took 3 full minutes. You waited because there was no skipping it. Be Kind, Rewind wasn't a cute bumper sticker. It was the social contract of the decade. And when the tape finally finished, that loud mechanical clunk as the reel stopped, The room got quiet. Lights went off. Popcorn appeared. The soft whirring of the machine under the TV became the background hum of home. Unless, of course, 15 minutes in, you heard the other sound. The grinding one. The one that meant the VCR had decided to eat your tape, and there was nothing you could do about it except perform surgery with a pencil and pray. The dot matrix printer. If you were anywhere near a computer in the 1980s, a school lab, an office, your dad's desk, you know this sound. That grinding, screeching, metallic back and forth as the print head dragged across the page. Line by agonizing line. A 2-page book report could take 10 minutes, and you stood there the entire time, watching it happen, because there was nothing else to do, and you didn't fully trust the machine to finish. Over 50 million dot matrix printers were sold during the decade. Every one of them sounded like a small robot having a breakdown. But the real ritual came after the printing stopped. Dot matrix paper came in one continuous connected sheet. Perforated edges, little holes running down both sides. You had to tear the strips off by hand, one at a time, trying for that perfect clean rip. Nobody ever got a perfect rip. Not once. Not in the entire decade. And if you tell me you never made a chain, a bracelet, or a tiny paper snake out of those hole-punched edge strips, you're lying, and we both know it. The Walkman Click. You already know this one. That soft, precise click when you pressed play. Then, the faint hiss. That warm, airy static before the music actually started, like the tape was taking a breath. It didn't matter where you were. The school bus, the back seat of the car, your bedroom floor, walking down the street pretending your life had a soundtrack. The moment that click happened, the outside world lost jurisdiction. When Sony released the Walkman in 1979, portable music didn't exist. By the mid-80s, it was everywhere. Over 30 million units sold. Walkman was in the dictionary. The orange foam headphones flattened within a month. The bass was more of a suggestion than a feature. You burned through AA batteries so fast you started carrying spares in your pocket like ammunition. None of that mattered, because inside that hiss, inside that click, was the first time in history a kid could walk through a crowd and be completely, privately, somewhere else. The mixtape you'd recorded off the radio, timing the gaps between songs, lunging for the stop button before the DJ talked over the outro, felt like something you'd built with your hands. And that click of the play button was the door to it.
That's what the camera's for.
This is fun, it's so fast.
World's fastest developing couple.
The Polaroid eject. Nobody said, "I'm taking a photo." They said, "Hold still." And then the camera fired. Shutter click, a mechanical shutter, and then chunk. The photo slid out of the front slot like a little white bordered ticket to 3 minutes from now. That eject sound was half the experience. Part mechanical spit, part conveyor belt, followed by the quiet whir of chemical rollers pressing an image into existence. You held it by the edges. You watched the murky green slowly resolve into shapes, then faces, then a moment that now physically existed in your hand. Polaroid sold roughly 6 million instant cameras in the early 80s, and every single owner did the same thing. They shook the photo, waved it, fanned it, blew on it like a tiny fire. Polaroid said repeatedly that this didn't help, might actually damage the print. Nobody cared. Shaking it felt right, and in the 80s, that was reason enough.
This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcasting system. This is only a test.
The emergency broadcast tone. You could be watching anything. Cartoons, a sitcom, a ball game, and then, without warning, that tone, that flat, droning, high-pitched tone that filled the entire room and made every kid in America freeze mid-chew. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. It didn't matter that it was always a test. Something about that sound, the pitch, the duration, the way it hijacked whatever you were watching without asking, made your stomach drop. Every time. The FCC required regular tests on every major network throughout the 80s, and you never knew when one was coming. It just seized your television. You'd sit there staring at the color bars, waiting for your show to come back, half convinced that this time it wasn't a test. As adults, we understand it was routine. As kids, that sound meant one thing. Something terrible is maybe happening right now, and no one is explaining it to you. The Channel 3 static. Before streaming, before smart TVs, before HDMI, there was Channel 3. If you owned a game console, a VCR, or anything that connected to your television with an RF switch, you had to tune to Channel 3 to use it. And before the signal locked in, you got the static. That roar. That loud, fizzing, black and white wall of visual noise paired with a sound like the inside of a seashell, amplified through a stadium. It wasn't background noise. It filled the room. It was the room. Then, if everything was connected properly, the picture snapped in and the static vanished. Relief. But if someone had bumped the switch to Channel 4, you were in for a long night, jiggling cables, flipping the switch back and forth, turning the TV off and on, asking someone to hold the RF adapter at an angle for reasons nobody could explain. Half of the 1980s was spent toggling between two channels and pretending you understood why one worked and the other didn't. The television sign-off. This one is nearly impossible for anyone under 30 to believe. Television used to end. Not the show, not the channel. Television itself. The entire broadcast day would finish, usually sometime after midnight, and the station would play the national anthem, show the flag, and shut down. What followed was the real memory. That steady, soft hiss, that snowstorm of static on the screen, glowing faintly in a dark room. No late-night reruns, no autoplay, no next episode. Just the sound of the signal stopping, and the world going quiet. It was strangely comforting, not because it was pleasant, but because it meant the day was actually, definitively over. There was nothing left to watch, nothing left to do, just static and sleep. We didn't know it at the time, but that sound was the last era where entertainment had an off switch, where the culture itself wound down and gave you permission to stop. That permission doesn't exist anymore. The Trapper Keeper Snap. This wasn't a school supply, it was a statement. The Trapper Keeper, introduced in 1978, ubiquitous by 1983, was the single most important object in your backpack. Not because it organized anything well, it didn't. The folders bent, the rings jammed, the Velcro collected lint. But the sound, the snap, that loud, plasticky, Velcro ripping slap when you closed it, echoed off classroom walls like a starting pistol. One kid would shut theirs, and 3 more would follow. And within seconds, the entire back row was producing a percussion line made of binders and attitude. Teachers hated it. Some tried banning it. But telling a 5th grader not to snap a Trapper Keeper was like telling them not to breathe. Technically possible, practically useless. And the thing everyone forgets, the snap wasn't just closing a folder, it was the signal. When the Trapper Keepers started snapping shut, class was over. Not because the bell rang, because the stationery said so. None of these sounds were designed to be remembered. They were accidents of engineering, side effects of plastic, metal, tape, and magnets doing their jobs in a world that hadn't figured out how to make things silent yet. But that's exactly why they lasted. They were woven into everything. The way we played, the way we watched, the way we talked, the way the day started, and the way it stopped. They weren't the main event. They were the texture around the main event. And texture is what memory holds onto longest. A quarter dropping into a slot, a phone slamming onto a cradle, a VCR clunking into place, a printer screeching through a book report, a television signing off for the night. Decades later, each one still has the power to pull you back to a specific room, a specific version of yourself, a specific moment you didn't know you were keeping. That's the real trick of sound. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just takes you there. If one of these grabbed you, tell me which one in the comments. And if there's a sound I missed that still lives in your head, I want to hear it. The best ones might end up in part 2. Subscribe to Nostalgic Nation. The next trip back starts soon.